This is Bad Movies We Love, part of the Shice Podcast Network.
If you're listening to this, you are the resistance.
Hello, Bad Movie Lovers, and welcome to the first ever Bad Movies Monthly. As always, I am your host, Nick Scheist.
The master of this stupid stuff!
Now, stupid stuff aside, this is a bit of a different format because this is going to be just me having a little more one-on-one time with you. Almost all of what I do on the show is talking to guests, whether that be people just coming on to talk about the bad movies they love, whether that is with me doing one of the Filmmaker in Focus episodes, whether it's me working with my partner Stephanie on Baimon Sci-Fi Con, or working with my wife on Rom-Comathon. I love having those conversations and being able to share them with you, but I also wanted to find a way to talk to you as the audience a little bit more directly. Most of the time when I do that, it's only here in the, 2 minutes worth of the intro, and even that I've trimmed down over time for various reasons. So now that I have this dedicated space, we'll see how it goes. It's entirely possible that you will hate this and you will not want me to continue doing it, and that's okay. I value informed feedback, and that's why I have a listener survey. It's short and it's anonymous. Really, I just want to know where you found the show. What is your general age demographic? What do you like most about the show? What do you like least about the show? Do you have a favorite episode? When you listen, in terms of like while you're commuting, maybe you're at the gym or something, what day do you listen to the show so that I know maybe there's a better day to release episodes, more convenient for you? Then there's a section for other comments and feedback where you can tell me literally whatever you want. And then I included a voluntary disclosure where if you want to include your name, I would love it, because then I can shout you out on the show and thank you directly. The survey will probably continue to evolve like it has over time. And, sometimes I read the answers to the survey when they come in, and I guess I missed one maybe from October. But this one says, the best thing about the show is the different perspectives from each guest and the host, and how the show celebrates films and never shames anyone for liking movies that others might deem as not good. Favorite episode? Drop Dead Fred. Love it. Great choice. So yeah, I don't know who that was, but if that was you, thank you. I appreciate the kind words, and I hope I can continue to deliver a high caliber, high quality show for you. So go to the show notes. You'll find the link for the listener survey there, and you can actually participate in making the show better. And speaking of making the show better, see what I did there? I know if you listen to the show, you know that occasionally I have very good segues. Was this one of them? I don't know. Time will tell. But let's start with some announcements. So first off, we had a lot of new listeners since the start of the year. So I want to say hello to all of those new listeners. Thank you for being here, and I hope you will stick around. We, and yes, I mean we, because I look at this as a collective effort, set new monthly records for downloads in both January, which crushed the previous high from October of 2025, and then February shows up and smashes January. This show reached a total of 47 different countries in the last 2 months. I think all of last year it was 39 countries. So that's kind of crazy. As it turns out, all of a sudden, Roku is the number one platform for people to listen to the show now. I didn't even know you could listen to podcasts through Roku at all. But if you're one of those people that is listening on Roku, I see you, and I appreciate you listening to the show. And if there is a way to leave a review, then please do so on the Roku app, I guess. I don't know. I'll leave that up to you. Either way, it's kind of wild because when I sat down at the end of the year and I started doing forecasting and like data analytics and looking at the trajectory of what the show's going to look like, already within the first 2 months of 2026, I've had to throw all of that out the window and start to make bigger and better plans than I already had in mind for the show. So thank you for being part of that and for helping grow the show. You also may have noticed that we've got some new show artwork. Quite frankly, it had been on my list of things to do for a while, and I had designed a concept art that I thought that I liked. And then the more I thought about it, the more I sort of tinkered with it, the more I went away from that. And I think it's still a good design, and maybe I'll use it on some premium features or something like that. But what I wanted to do ultimately was not reinvent the wheel, but to go back to the drawing board a little bit and just freshen up the artwork that already existed for the show. Because it has been, I don't know, 5 years since I started the show. And when I had made that artwork, I did something that was identifiable and I thought that was fun for me. But the show has grown up a lot since then. I wanted the new show art to honor the origins of where the show came from and where it started, but to also just have sort of a new coat of paint and a better, more direct look than it had previously. And I wanted to incorporate the show colors, which is that pink and blue that I really like a lot. And I wanted that to be featured because I had decided on those colors, but those were never featured on the original show art. So now I've got all the things I want in the show artwork, and while it may look a little bit different, so you may be looking through your saved shows and the icon doesn't look the same, but I think for the longevity of the show, it was the right choice, and I'm happy with it. I hope you like it. If you don't, I'm sorry. You can use the listener survey to tell me that you don't like it, but I like it, and I'm not going to change it back. I am pleased to announce that this show and all of the other shows in the Shice Podcast Network are now up and available on YouTube and YouTube Music. You know, back when I first did distribution for the show through my podcast host, I could have sworn that there was Google distribution, and then that should have automatically translated to YouTube, but it didn't. So all these years, it was never available, but now it is. It's still primarily in audio form, just with a static image. And I think I'm going to begin to fold in some more video, but like video editing is a whole additional thing. And at the end of the day, like this is all a one-person operation. And I still have a regular day job. So I have to be more selective with what I want to include in terms of video, but maybe I'll start throwing up some of the clips that I put on Instagram as promotional stuff. Maybe that can add that. Maybe I can add the interview series in there because it doesn't require as much editing. There's not sound effects and music cues and all that. But I did want to let you know that you can find it there now if you're interested. And if you're listening to this because you first discovered the show on YouTube and then wanted to get in on the actual podcast side of things, the audio-only version, welcome to the show. I'm happy to have you here, and that was the idea with putting the show on YouTube in the first place. So there are a couple new additions to the show that have been part of the reason that I've been a little bit overbooked through the first couple of months. Number one, I started to include, or at least specify, movies that are what I'm going to say on the bubble. Because the rating system that I use for this show, it takes scores from all over the place, aggregates them into one number, and then if that number is higher than 60, it technically, to me, sort of evades my grasp as a quote-unquote bad movie. But I feel like a lot of stuff that's in the 60 to 65 range also doesn't necessarily qualify it as a good movie. So I started to include what we're calling on the bubble picks for movies that land between a 60 and a 65 on that scale. So at this point, you have seen and you will continue to see movies that are on the bubble pics. There's going to be a little bubble on the show art, and it's going to say on the bubble right there. And I think I also decided that I'm going to include the aggregate scoring on all of the promotional materials. So that way, when inevitably somebody always comes into the comments saying that this is not a bad movie, and I say, don't tell me, you need to talk to all of the critics that scored it accordingly. It's a real don't shoot the messenger kind of situation. And along with the bubble picks that we're going to be doing, I know that my bread and butter is quote unquote bad movies. It's where my heart is. I love the fact that I get to shine a light on some of these films and have like actual meaningful conversations about movies that kind of get thrown away for being bad. Like they're not treated with any kind of sort of like artistic respect or integrity. And a lot of the time, like, look, I understand, but one of the things that I find so rewarding about doing the show and about talking to people about it is that despite some of these movies being very noticeably bad in a lot of ways, having those conversations about why they're meaningful, about why they've been impactful to people is really the heart of the show. That's the thing that we're getting at, is the core of why people like the things that they do. And we do it from a place of respect. I don't shame anybody. If anything, I'm here to encourage them to continue to like the kinds of movies that they do and to continue to follow that part of them that wants to make their own choices and make up their own minds about their own personal taste. And speaking of personal taste, see, I did that segue thing again that I've gotten so good at. Or maybe you think I suck at it. You should also fill out the listener survey and tell me that my segues are bad. Or if you like them, tell me that they're good and I'll continue to do them. But anyway, one of my favorite things to do for the show is to come up with our sponsor segments. You can't see me right now, but I'm doing air quotes around the word sponsor because, you know, if you've only listened to an episode or two, there was enough suspension of disbelief maybe that these were kind of insane products. But in order to help myself and stay within the realm of world building and adhere to sort of the confines of what I do on the show, I started to make those ad reads and those products much more specifically tailored to the movie that we were discussing. And as I started to do that, I think I had a little bit more creative freedom to be more insane with the types of products that I was designing here. And coming up with those zany products, writing the script for that, choosing the music for that, sequencing all that, doing the sound effects, it's really fun. It's a really engaging way for me to flex my creative muscle because a lot of the show is me talking to somebody else and not always getting to do that element that I really, really love. So it's been a key tenet of the show for a long time. If you've been listening to the show for a while, or if you're listening to it from the beginning now, you'll notice that it sort of comes across as, hey, this show is sponsored by this person, or here's a word from our sponsor, right? I intentionally changed the language around that for season 5 to pivot and turn it into commercials from the multiverse. And the reason that I did that is because you're going to be hearing some actual sponsors and ads on the show in the future. As much as I would like the show to be completely listener supported forever, the reality of the situation is that it costs money to do this show. It costs money to run the website. It costs money to host the domain and pay for the security certificates. And on top of that, it takes a lot of time to produce a single episode of the show, which is why I ended up falling behind in the first place, or at least part of the reason why I was behind in January and why this episode is coming out in March, looking back at January and February. That being said, I'm talking to sponsors that, number one, I use and believe in every day. And number two, that I think fit thematically with what the show does and offers value to you as the listeners. For example, if I'm listening to a movie podcast, I don't want to hear an ad for an Indian casino in the middle of the desert. If I'm listening to a news podcast and they're doing a segment on the dangers of AI and they bring in a specialist to talk about this, I don't want the very next ad following that segment to be a commercial for an AI product. It's insulting. I completely understand the need to monetize the show to be able to continue to do it, and that's why I'm reaching out to sponsors in the first place. And if you're listening to the show on an ad-supported platform like Spotify, or if you're checking out the show on YouTube, I have no control over what ads are going to come in at what segments during the show, but I do have control over who I reach out to and who I allow access to the audience. And I want to do that in a way that respects you as the audience and also respects the show and what we do here. I've worked too long and too hard to build a grassroots audience for this show. And I don't want to sacrifice that by alienating all of you with a bunch of ads that you're not interested in and you're just going to skip when they come on anyway. In the same way that I wanted to build a community for this show that understands the mission of what we're doing here, I want to be in partnership with brands and sponsors that align with those values. And so I just wanted to let you know what's going on and that I am taking it seriously and I respect you as an audience member and I don't want to burn that bridge. I also want to take this opportunity to thank the supporters, the Resistance Frontline members who are monetary contributors to the show, and some of them have been for a while. So a big thank you to Ben and Sean and Kristen and Sharon and Donnie and Brian and Todd and Melissa. All of you have helped keep the show going strong for the last 4 seasons plus. And I want you to know that not only has your money gone to help support other independent artists like the musicians who I pay to license their music for the show, I am also working on some special members-only gifts that I'm going to get sent out to you real soon as I can actually finish the design and get it printed, that is. But thank you for being part of the team. It really means a lot to me that you believed in the show enough to support it, even when you got nothing out of it. And generally speaking, I also want to thank everyone who is listening to this, or maybe not listening to this yet, but anyone out there who has taken the time to share an episode of the show with a friend, to maybe tell a family member about it. Maybe you decided to throw on an episode around Thanksgiving or Christmas to share with the family. I've said it before, and I'll say it again because I believe in it. Word of mouth is the best way to help. And the show continues to grow, so I just wanted to say thank you for believing in it and believing in it enough to share it with somebody else. Now, this is the part where I'm going to ask you for help. So during the intro to the show, I used to ask for people to make sure that they follow the show, that they, like the show. I don't really know how podcast platforms work. I don't think there's a like button, but there is like a follow button. So I wanted to make sure that people were actually following the show, and I would ask people to leave reviews. And so rather than doing that at the top of every individual episode, I'm just going to do it once a month when I'm doing Bad Movies Monthly. So if you're listening to this, I think especially on Apple Podcasts, because that is the second most popular way to listen to the show, that is where reviews become really valuable. So please, if you're listening to the show on Apple Podcasts, take a moment, even right now, hit pause on the episode, go to the show notes, and you can go to the show page, and directly from there, you can rate and leave a review for the show. It may seem like a small and innocuous thing, but it's kind of shorthand for virtual word of mouth, and it actually helps a lot when you can see reviews and ratings of podcasts. So if you can leave a review and a rating on any of the podcast platforms you listen to, please do, because it actually does help. And if you want to be a contributing member to the Resistance Frontlines and get access to the Discord server, all of the sub-series like Baimon Sci-Fi Con, Bad Movie Futures, which we're going to have a ton of new episodes coming out on, Rom-Comathon, if you want to be eligible automatically for all future giveaways if you're a contributing member to the show, and new members get a nice little welcome pack, and that includes a random movie, a little handwritten thank you note, and a little sticker set. And like I said earlier, the $5 just really helps keep the lights on, and it helps me support independent artists who then get their work folded into this show. So if you want to join up, you can do that at badmovieswelove.captivate.fm/support. And there is a link for that in the show notes, so you can just click where it says support the show. And I know I said that I was going to get the show onto Patreon because it's a lot more familiar in terms of name recognition, and maybe people are just more comfortable with that, and I am going to do it, I promise. So if you want to wait until that's a realistic possibility, that's totally fine too. But if you're 20 minutes deep listening to an episode where I'm just flapping my gums, then you seem like the type that wants to support this show and be part of this community. So if you're so inclined, please consider signing up and becoming a member. So now I want to take a look back at what we did here on the show during January, and also what was going on in theaters to see if anything could be part of the Bad Movies We Love equation moving forward. But also, if you follow the account, if you follow the show on Instagram, you will see that, I was behind and I was feeling very unmotivated for a while in January, and there was a lot of civil unrest in the country, and I think we were all sort of collectively watching it play out on the news or on our phones because the news is not showing us a lot of things. And it was disheartening for obviously a number of reasons, and doing a movie podcast, especially about the kind of movies that I talk about here, I'm the master of the stupid stuff. So when there's serious stuff going on, which there, is quite a bit, it's a little difficult sometimes to find the motivation to want to do the show. And I had a lot of discussions about things off the air, off mic, and I ultimately came to the conclusion that continuing to do the show was a net good for both me and hopefully for you as the listeners. And I think looking at the increase in download volume over the course of January and February actually tells me that I made the right decision. And so, to paraphrase a quote that is attributed to Bob Marley that is used in the film I Am Legend, Neville's character says about Marley, "The people that are trying to make the world worse are not taking days off. How can I?" And while this isn't rocket science, I'm not curing cancer with the show. Obviously, I don't elevate what I do here into that realm. But what I do try to do here is to provide not just the audience, but also myself with laughter and with joy. And so I hope that translates. I hope that you have enjoyed the show, and I hope that you've laughed. And, along the way, we have serious discussions. We learn things. So it's a place where I feel like sort of the best comes out of me and hopefully out of my guests as well. And I hope that you see that. So when looking back at the January slate of films, we started with Supernova with my friend Donald, who's been on the show many times. He has become the de facto sort of starting guest for each season of the show. I think he's been the first guest on 3 or 4 seasons out of 5 total. So you're probably familiar with him. He and I are working on a new podcast project together. This one is mostly him, and that's totally fine. I've got enough to deal with right now anyway. But that show, Film Wars, is going to be part of this network, the Shice Podcast Network. And that show is going to feature Donald hosting with a couple of guests, both competing to draft a team based on a specific film theme, and then based on the results of your draft, that is going to go to public vote, and then you as the listeners, as the public, are going to have the right to pick which team you think is best, and there will be some sort of prize arrangement made. So if you're interested in participating in that, feel free to drop me a line. I will make sure to pass the message along. I might even be the person sitting across the virtual table. You might see my face on the screen as we draft teams against one another. After Supernova, we moved on to You're the Hunter from the Future, where I was joined by Sam Panico from BNS About Movies and Groovy Doom on YouTube. And I had the pleasure this past weekend of spending 7.5 hours with Sam and Bill from Groovy Doom, and we watched a double header of Godzilla movies, which was a treat for me, and we had a fun hang. So if you want to check that out, look for the Groovy Doom show on YouTube. Then I was joined by Betsy and Trent from the Never Seen It podcast, and they were here to talk about Andrew Niccol's In Time, which we all agreed was a almost great movie. So make sure to check out that show if you had fun with us. Then my Baimon Sci-Fi-Con partner, Stephanie, joined me for an episode on the main show as we talked about Virtuosity. That's right, Denzel and a very young Russell Crowe. Really fun movie, probably going to be a Hall of Famer for 2026. I've got to rework how I'm going to do the Hall of Fame class, because I think I should probably just do an induction ceremony at the end of the year rather than episode by episode, especially when I look back and I'm like, hey, this is a great movie and a great episode. It deserves it. It requires me to not have to be on the spot to do that, and I think that's probably a better formula. But that being said, Stephanie also joined me for a Baimon Sci-Fi-Con episode for members, and we talked about Adam McKay's movie Don't Look Up. And then closing out the sci-fi theme, my wife joined me for our first bubble pick, which was in January, and that was the TV movie Not Quite Human, which is just super 80s. That's all I can say. It feels so at home in that genre. I wanted more robot stuff, but it was still fun to look back on. And then that month closed out. We had our Filmmaker in Focus episode that month with Suk-Yin Lee talking about her film Paying for It as she was beginning her US and I think North America tour. So a really fun month that was packed with great episodes, and I feel like maybe I was overbooked, but well worth it. And then at the theaters, I didn't see that many movies, but one that I liked that looks like it might be worthy of the show because of the scoring was We Bury the Dead, which I liked. It didn't reinvent the wheel when it comes to sort of the zombie genre or anything like that, but I felt like it was solid, and it has an aggregate score of 60.8, so that's well within the bubble, and I think I can get my hands on it. And then the other one that was in January that I think probably qualifies is Primate. Primate was fun, don't get me wrong. It's got some really good practical effects that sort of lean into the horror genre, and the whole man in suit performance of the ape I think was a really cool choice. But this movie also has some ridiculous stuff, like a borderline MMA fight between Troy Kotsur and this monkey. And some of the writing choices and some of the decisions in the film, I think, really lean into the like bad movie culture, but the level of execution is high enough to where it was enjoyable. So I see why people like it, and I liked it. But it does have an aggregate score of 63.5. So again, in the bubble, I might pinch it if I need something. February is horror month here on the show, and perhaps that changes in the future and I move it to October where it seems more naturally slated. But for the time being, it's still in February where it has been throughout the course of the show. And we made the transition from Sci-Fi Month to Horror Month with Bloodsuckers from Outer Space, where I was joined by Jamie Ray from Fave 5 from Fans. Then a movie that was long overdue, kind of, because I'd always wanted to talk about it. It was on my list. It was a bubble pick, but when I ran the numbers initially a couple years ago, it was below the threshold, so we were good to go. But I was joined by Jonathan Jans, a prolific horror author, friend of the show, and he stopped by to talk about Ravenous, which is a great cult horror, folk horror, satire, dark comedy, frontier western. It's got a lot of things going on in that movie, and I feel like just Robert Carlyle is immaculate, and that movie deserves a second coming. We moved from Ravenous to another Alfred Packer story, and that was actually the first Good Movies We Love episode. And while Good Movies We Love is going to be a members exclusive for Resistance Frontline contributors, because it was the first one, and because the idea was this is bad, but ultimately the ratings were too good for me to call it bad, I kind of just made an exception, and that way we have proof of concept, and it's out there to check it out. But we talked about Cannibal the Musical, and I was joined by Josh, Joel, and Miranda from Weekend at Deckard's for that. We had a lot of fun. That movie's crazy. It does so many different things. You really see kind of the groundwork for something like a South Park or a Book of Mormon or Team America from Trey and Matt. So if you're interested in sort of like filmmakers and how they got their start and where they developed their sort of style, I think Cannibal the Musical is a really fun way to get into that. Then we moved on from Cannibals to Frankensteins, I guess, as I was joined by Steven from the Stacks podcast, where we talked about Night of the Bloody Apes, which is what I'm going to say is a Mexican giallo, because it feels like it really desperately wants to sort of be considered in the realm of Italian horror of the era. But what it really is Gorilla Frankenstein. And we talked during that episode about whether or not the son, who is dying of leukemia or something, really would have just been out doing all of the violent acts had he not been bedridden with his illness. And in the trailer, I noticed a line after the fact where it says, "The lust of a man in the body of an ape," I think. And so it does allude to the fact that this guy probably was the evil thing that we saw, and then he just was roided out on gorilla blood. But anyway, that movie's crazy. The episode was a lot of fun. Steven's always a joy to talk to, so check it out. And then completely counterintuitive to the theme, for Rom-Comathon, which is a members-only exclusive, my wife joined me and we talked about The Family Stone because we had watched it during the holidays and I just had not had a chance to edit it. So that became the Rom-Comathon episode for the month of February. And then our filmmaker in focus for the month was Wes Clark, who joined the show to talk about his new film, How to Start a Cult in 5 Easy Steps. But he also hung out and we talked about sort of how he got his start in filmmaking, what he sees the industry looking like in the future, and his general approach to stylistic choices, like how to use satire in a film. It was a really fun and informative interview, so if you like that side of the business and you kind of want to pull back the curtain and see what goes on in the mind of a filmmaker, those Filmmaker in Focus episodes are a great way to do that. I got out to the movies a little bit more in February, and it looks like we've got some good contenders for Bad Movie Futures coming up. I'm going to have to really dedicate some time to that because I just booked about 20 episodes of that subseries, and I'm really going to have to power through those. But Just Whistle, I feel like is a good contender. It's got a 57.83, so right under the threshold. It does some good things, but ultimately totally understand the rating here. and I think I could sort of safely qualify it on the bad side. Then we've got Dracula, which is currently sitting at a 64.5. I liked it, but I also like Luc Besson and Caleb Landry Jones, and I liked looking at Dracula from this angle. So I'm probably more forgiving than some people, but that's going to be a movie that's on the bubble. It's like, did we need another Dracula movie? That's probably working against it. But that said, I enjoyed it, so I would champion for it. Then we've got Psycho Killer, which is sitting at a 34.5, and I think it's better than that, although I can acknowledge it is weird, and if you go into it expecting a slasher or even a horror movie, I would say you're probably going to be disappointed, but at least for me, I didn't have expectations. Granted, the movie's called Psycho Killer. It really is more of a cat and mouse sort of like police investigation of a serial killer movie. So it's kind of blending slasher elements with like something like Zodiac, right? And so it's weird. And then I won't spoil the ending, but the ending like takes a really big swing and sort of takes it out of the realm of either of those two genres. So, buyer beware, but it would be fun to talk about. And then the last one on the list that I thought would qualify would be Iron Lung. Now, I want to choose my words carefully because Iron Lung is both a movie that I don't think is good, but I also admire and respect because obviously this is a first-time filmmaker. This is a video game adaptation. There's a lot of things working against this movie in terms of sort of like quality limitations. And a lot of that shows up on screen, if I'm going to be perfectly honest. However, it's ambitious. It does have some very cool close-up camera work. It has some fun set design that I think works for the thing that they are trying to accomplish. I feel like the story in the game is interesting, but in watching the movie, it did sort of make me more interested in the game. And I don't know that that's necessarily the solution. I will say the biggest weakness for me is that the movie's 2 hours and 7 minutes long, and what is on screen doesn't justify that runtime. I think this movie could easily be an hour and a half and be the same movie. And the problem is redundancy. I think because of the limitations, there felt like this responsibility to like show things on camera. But what we're seeing so often is just the same thing that we've already seen. And so that becomes a problem because you're not like moving the narrative forward. That said, the movie has a 71.17 aggregate score. So realistically, I think it's too high at this point for me to talk about. I think over time that number will come down as more people see it and people who aren't fans of Mark as the person that they know that they went to support, maybe the movie sort of like begins to find its level. But like I said, I was still impressed. I still admire and respect what went into the movie, and I was kind of bored by it. And so that brings us to current. And so now we're talking about what's on deck in March. So on deck, we've got Debs, and I'll be joined by Ike and Sandra from Two Beer Cinema Club. We've got Spice World on deck, and I'm joined by another new person. This is Tara Jabari. She is a podcaster as well. Josie and the Pussycats. I should be joined by Michelle, who you've heard on this podcast before, talking about Wet Hot American Summer and Hot Rod. Then Raph from The Canon is going to join me for Charlie's Angels. My wife is going to join me to talk about First Wives Club. And then our Good Movies We Love episode is going to be The Craft. And we're going to do a full-on quad box for that episode. And I'll be joined by my friend Felicia, who you know from The Mask and Megalopolis, along with some new friends, Emily Black and Josie Robinson. So March is pretty full, and that's just the stuff that I actually have my eyeballs on. There may be a Bad Movie Futures that sneaks in there since I started planning all this stuff, but There's a lot to look forward to, and that'll start tomorrow. And that brings us to the end of the first Bad Movies Monthly. If you're still here listening to me ramble by myself at the 40-minute mark, thank you. I know there are other things you could be doing with your time, and the fact that you chose to listen to this says a lot, and I appreciate it. I'm always going to treat your time like it's valuable because I know my time is valuable. I'm not here to bullshit you. I'm not here to blow smoke up your ass and tell you that everything about the show is epic all the time. You'll never hear me say smash that like and follow button. I'm here to hopefully make you laugh, to make you smile, to share in our love of all things movies, and to remove the stigmas of shame that unfortunately do exist within the film community. And if you made it this far and you're listening to my voice right now, you're probably on the same page. So thanks for hanging out. Take care.